my Twitter. It is going out today to the masses. Orange and blue today. Even
It's
though we
one
can't
less
hear
thing
it.
that title perhaps than Orange Blue Edition 6 2023.
Yeah.
Can we put topics in there?
We can do whatever we want.
We will. Well, let's do that in a few. Let's we'll figure
That's
that.
what July is for.
Or tomorrow when we're talking about OTAs.
Or July.
Or Thursday.
Orange and blue
Wait,
today.
I'm sorry. I thought OTAs were tomorrow, and that meant I thought today was Wednesday when today is actually Tuesday.
Today is Tuesday.
Tuesday doesn't have a feel. Tuesday doesn't have a feel.
No.
At all.
No, it's like afterwards of Monday and then Tuesday. I know I have a feel of Batman and the Flash, which I'm going to see tonight, Mace.
Yeah.
You're going to host Denver Sports tonight.
Yeah, I've only been to one movie in person since COVID.
Not a movie guy?
It's just something I found that I could live without. I mean, for example, Take Air, right? I just watched that a couple of Sundays ago.
Yeah, good movie.
Yeah. All you had to do was wait 6 weeks, and there it was streaming for you at home on something you'd already paid for because you pay for Prime because you get the free delivery and all that, right?
Of course.
To our Amazon corporate overlords.
Yes.
So, yeah, I'm just like, fine, I'll just wait a few weeks.
Okay. Well,
Popcorn's cheaper, soda's cheaper, everything's cheaper.
Let me finish. I might have some popcorn. Anyway, it is Orange and Blue today. We are presented by Champ Honda and Mace as we wait for the final OTA on Thursday. And then, of course, minicamp next week. We got to go over something that's been out for a minute as Pro Football Focus continues to put out their rankings. And they've had some commentary on the Broncos offensive line. We'll start with the tackle ranking, which I believe might have come out first. Don't quote me on that. But Pro Football Focus ranking the Broncos offensive tackles. I don't think it surprised anyone. Out of the top 32, that Mike McGlinchey is in the 20s somewhere. Okay, McGlinchey's fine. He holds a lot, but he's sitting there at 21, coming over from the San Francisco 49ers and 5 seasons of PFF grade. He didn't have one lower than 69.
Nice.
There we go. And then Garett Bolles is at 23. This is the top 32 tackles in the league. The Broncos have 2 in the top 32.
2 in the top 23.
Yes, 2 in the top 23. Are you surprised by that alone before we talk about the players individually?
Well, I know this on Garett Bolles, even though it's a few years out and even though it looks like the aberration, PFF had him extremely high during the COVID year of 2020. And that still echoes. And I think because he had a season like that, while he hasn't matched that level, he hasn't fallen off the cliff. And I think that the 23 ranking makes sense. Mike McGlinchey, it's interesting because I don't think it's a question of whether he's a top 25 tackle of the 64 starters in the league. So that puts him, very solidly in the top half. That isn't the question on McGlinchey. The question is he worth elite money? That's where I think you have the debate as to whether you're going to get everything that you're investing financially in terms of what you're paying for Mike McGlinchey. That's the deal. Not whether he's a solid tackle and a capable starter and even an above average starter, but whether he's worth being one of the highest paid tackles in football.
Well, and what it feels like is they finally have right tackle figured out since the Orlando Franklin days. But like you said, is it going to be worth the money with Mike McGlinchey? There's going to be a lot of holding. Hopefully he stays healthy. But to me, it feels better than the cast, Donald Stevenson, the cast of thousands, it seems like, that we've rotated through for the Broncos at right tackle. It's been a minute, Mace, since they've had that, dare I say, bookend tackles? I mean, they're getting graded by Pro Football Focus as bookend tackles, basically.
I mean, you go through the rotation, the number of guys that they've had at right tackle over the last decade since they moved to Orlando Franklin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 19 different starting tackles.
Wait a second, what?
19 different starting right tackles.
And that was what, 20?
That's 2014 through 2022.
Right, yeah.
9 years, 19 different starting right tackles for the Broncos.
That's terrible.
And the thing is, it's not like they haven't tried to make the big swing in free agency. They did.
Yes.
Jawan James, total bust, 3 starts, injured. Donald, and then you have the moderate free agents, Donald Stevenson,
Menelik
Watson, 7 starts. Donald Stevenson, by the way, ranks second in starts at right tackle over the previous 9 seasons for the Broncos. You know who number 1 is? See if you can guess.
Ooh, number 1 at right tackle.
Yes.
Wow.
Checking in at number 1 with 19 starts over the last 9 years. It's
okay, Casey Kasem.
Elijah Wilkinson. 19 starts
I
at right
felt
tackle.
bad for Elijah because I felt he was a left. I was like,
Yeah.
he could compete at left, and then it just kind of, it's one of those things where he washes at both.
Yeah. Cam Fleming, who it feels like just got here, ranks 3rd.
Holy cow.
Yeah. It's Elijah Wilkinson, Donald Stevenson, Cam Fleming, Bobby Massey, Michael Schofield. That's your top 5 in terms of starts by Broncos right tackles over the last 9 years.
Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.
And leave your dial tuned right where it is.
Okay, so right tackle seems to be solved with McGlinchey. And then Garett Bolles, Detroit Mission Control, our guy says it might actually be make or break year. I absolutely think it is 100% a make or break year for Garett Bolles. Don't want to make his masseuse mad, but like you look at Garett Bolles, you're like, okay, I'm not asking for him to be 2020 Mace, okay? But where is a proper expectation for Bolles in your eyes?
Solid season, doesn't rank among the league leaders in holding penalties. Just enough to where you can say, all right, if you go into 2024 right now, by the way, and the reason why it's a big year for Garett Bolles is the Broncos could cut him before the start of the league year next year and save $16 million on their 2024 cap with only $4 million left of dead money.
Wow.
So this is the make or break year. And there's a level of play where if he's not great, you maybe say he's a restructure candidate. If he's solid, though, I think then you say, okay, we're going to run it back, play out the last year of the contract here. Even though $20 million is a big cap number, you can restructure that, get a little bit of relief there. And if he has a really good season, let's say Garett Bolles looks closer to 2020 Garett Bolles than at any other point in his career. If he does that, then shoot, maybe you're talking about a little extension for Garett Bolles.
Little being the operative word.
Adding a year or 2.
Yes, because he's 29. Is that right? I think he's 29.
No.
He's always been an older
No,
tackle.
He's on the other side of 30.
He's on the other side of
30.
The
Broncos drafted him
at 26, I believe.
No. He was 24, about to turn 25 when the Broncos drafted him.
Okay.
Old, but not that old. Garett Bolles just turned 31 years old on May 27th. So 31-year-old tackle. Now, we have seen tackles be pretty effective going into their mid-30s and late 30s. Jason Peters, Andrew Whitworth come to mind. So it's not inconceivable for Garett Bolles to be an effective left tackle for another few years. All of that's going to be determined by how well he looks coming off of that injury that he had last year. Because when you're talking about a fractured ankle like he had, you get into your 30s, you suffer that. It can be tough to come all the way back from. We're going to find out pretty quickly when this season starts whether Garett Bolles is ready to go.
Okay, and I hate to do this, but since we had audio problems yesterday, if Mace doesn't sound somewhat equal to me in the chat room, let me know and I'll go over there and adjust.
Actually, the thing is throwing me off is I'm echoing.
Yeah, and I'll go take care of that as well.
Yeah.
So Mace, hold court for a little bit. I'll be right back.
Hold, please. Well, yes. What more could I say? I maybe you should have gone over there when I was doing my Garett Bolles monologue there and what his 2023 season need to look like in order to talk about, like I said, maybe even a short-term extension beyond next year. But that's the thing. I mean, this is the fork in the road moment for Garett Bolles. It's his second fork in the road moment. The first one came back in 2020 and when the Broncos didn't pick up the 5th-year option. Then he had his career season, and then John Elway re-signed him late in the 2020 season. It's debatable how good that move looks. Now, what would have looked even better is if, in retrospect, the Broncos had picked up the 5th-year option and he'd had that marvelous 2020, and then you would have said, okay, let's see how it looks in 2021. And then the question would have been, would you have re-signed him? Because clearly he came back to the pack a bit in 2021. And it's fair to say that maybe Garett Bolles, his best season, happened in part because of the circumstances of the COVID year, no crowds, when there were holding penalties, which there were few, no booing. And then even that year, holding penalties were down league-wide.
Significantly,
Yes.
right. Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. And with McGlinchey, what does he need to do? And listen, plenty of 49ers fans chimed in as soon as the Broncos get McGlinchey, and they're like, "That good riddance, get him off our hands." Okay, I feel good about McGlinchey. I know he's going to hold a lot. Going into this, I have proper expectations for McGlinchey, but it feels good that it's not Menelik Watson or Donald Stevenson or my man Elijah Wilkinson, who, again, I think was more of a left.
Somebody that you can trust over there, even though it's not perfect. And whenever a player becomes available at that stage, okay, why did that first team not want him? Now, with 49ers, you've got a pretty talented roster. They're far above average in terms of the quality of their drafting. So the 49ers are a team that has players become available because they make some tough choices, kind of like the Broncos back when they were rolling in the mid-2010s, and effectively they have to decide between Malik Jackson and Derek Wolfe, and then at linebacker between Brandon Marshall and Danny Trevathan. They had to make those tough choices because they were succeeding at developing players in a way that the 49ers are now, and the Broncos haven't really in the last few years.
Okay, Holy Diver says, mark my words. So we're marking them, buddy, right here on 343 on June 6th.
Yeah.
July's vacation. If the five
We're still doing
O-line
shows, though.
Stay healthy. We are. They will be considered at least a top 10 O-line by the end of the season. Mark my words.
Okay,
we're
then.
get into the interior guys in just a little bit, Mace, and also the good Cush, Lloyd Cushenberry, coming up.
But that's a big if. How often do
top
offensive
10?
lines stay healthy all the way through a season?
Not. I mean, what, Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
Did they stay healthy last year? It's pretty rare.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare. So we'll be discussing the depth of this team as we lead up to training camp, obviously during training camp. But top 10 O-line, I don't know if I'm ready to go there with that. I feel better about this offensive line. Top 10 might be a little bit too far for me.
Well, for a top 10 offensive line, you'd have to figure, okay, at least one starter is top 10 at their position, right?
Yeah.
And
maybe Pro Bowl level.
Right. And that's the question that you have. How many of these guys are top 10 caliber? I'd say with Bolles and McGlinchey, you're talking about a couple of guys, and this is specific to just left tackle and right tackle for each of them, they just missed the top 10. We're going to get into the guards in the interior, in the center on the interior in a little bit. I think you have somebody or two somebodies at guard who could both be top 10 guards. We're not sure if they're there yet. With Ben Powers, for example, he's got to stack another year that looks like last year did. And for Quinn Miners, he's got to continue on the ascent. If both of those things happen, you could be talking about a pair of top 10 guards. And then the conversation as for whether it's a top 10 offensive line could be one that you have relative to his point about, hey, if they stay healthy, they could push.
Yeah. Stay healthy. You'll see what you can do. Now, Pro Football Focus has the guard rankings for the Denver Broncos, and I'll tell the story that I told you just minutes ago, Mace, when we were leading up to the show. I was like, hey, wow, you look at the guard rankings for Pro Football Focus, and Quinn Miners, he's sitting there at 12. And I think that while we bag on Nathaniel Hackett for due reason, nobody talks enough about Butch Berry and how terrible it was to have Butch Berry here as the offensive line coach. I know enough behind the scenes to know that when guys, let's say it was Lassie Bark here, Quinn Miners would ask for help. Butch Berry would cuss at him and tell him just go do it better. He wasn't actually teaching him. And I don't know if I have to say allegedly or whatever, but I've talked to enough people that know that Butch Berry didn't teach anybody anything. An awful coach, worse than what Nathaniel Hackett was a head coach. Nobody talks about it. Quinn Miners is at 12. What would he be now with better coaching?
Imagine a universe where Nathaniel Hackett doesn't hire his buddy Butch Berry to coach offensive line and instead retains Mike Munchak.
Oh, beautiful.
Would have made all the sense in the world, right?
Would have been great.
Nathaniel Hackett might still be the coach today with that one move. If he'd kept Munchak. That's something to think about. That's something to ponder.
Yes.
But he didn't. He brought in Bushbury, who, by the way, didn't even take a step back. He got fired by the Broncos. And by the way, the other thing about Bushbury being fired is that was one of the moves where Jerry Rossberg wasted no time whatsoever. It was Bushbury and Dwayne Stukes gone. Now, the funny thing is, a couple of days later, Rossberg still had some good things to say about Bushbury and was very cordial, not so much on Dwayne Stukes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's another story entirely. I like Dwayne Stukes, though. I thought he gave great press conferences.
He did. Us media are suckers for good press conferences. So as I told you before the show, Mace, I was like, wow, Quinn Miners is at 12. Ben Powers must be above him. Ben Powers isn't listed in the top 32. I've gone over the list multiple times. If I missed him, let me know, Mace. But you're going to tell me that the top free agent that the Broncos go get, pay him a bunch of money. Ben Powers, highly respected by everyone in the scouting community that I talk to. Ben Powers doesn't rank as a top guard.
I mean,
32.
In my opinion, Ben Powers is better at his position. With all respect to Mike McGlinchey, if you're ranking, Ben Powers is better at his spot than Mike McGlinchey would be over at right tackle.
So what am I missing here? Like, why is he not top 32? McGlinchey and Bolles are both in the top 32.
Pro Football Focus is arguing that Ben Powers is a bottom half of the league starting guard.
I do not
which
believe
I
that
think
whatsoever.
is false, patently
Fake
false.
news.
Based on what we saw last year. I love the Ben Powers signing. I've said on air, I think Ben Powers, that he's going to be the gem of this free agent class for the Broncos, and he's going to be a Pro Bowler for the Broncos at some point.
He's their best player up front. And I love Quinn Miners at 12. I think it might be a touch high.
But
honestly.
He's still growing. I think you might be talking
He's
about Quinn Miners 12 next year.
Yes, that would be fine. But if Ben Powers was at 10, I might be like, that's a little low. He's not in the top 32. And again, we respect PFF, whatever. But like,
this is a miss on their part, I think.
Wow, huge miss. Did they forget that Ben Powers was playing? Like, seriously, you cannot rationally, from a football mindset, explain to me why Ben Powers is not on this list.
The interesting thing is on this, it didn't even have like a, others of note.
Yeah, right.
Among this. And
almost made the cut or whatever.
Yeah, like there's no rationalization given for why Ben Powers isn't a top half of the league guard. Basically what this is.
I don't know Gordon McGinnis, but I'd reach out to him, be like, hey, did you forget Ben Powers? Like, seriously, this is a sham of a what?
I mean, I'll just give you some names that are considered above Ben Powers based on this. Taven Jenkins from the Bears, who can't stay healthy.
Right.
Jonah Jackson, Detroit, who you can dominate on the interior in pass rush.
They have Lincoln Tomlinson,
who's declining,
who's not good anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Lincoln Tomlinson 3 years ago, absolutely.
Yes,
but not today. Mark Glowinski also on this list.
Right.
Those players are not better than Ben Powers, just to name a few.
Yeah, and as we go through the top 32, and we're going to get to the good kush here in just a little bit. Orange Blue today, presented by Champ Honda.
You got to do that radio reset, don't you?
All the time, baby. All the time.
It's a digital show. I know, but it's okay. We're not on radio. You don't need to do that. I'm here to help you.
You're here to help me. I need to do that to make all of our people happy. You want to make our people happy? You're going to make our people happy.
We got to make, There's one group of people in particular you make very happy with that.
Yes. There's 5 players on the Broncos offensive line. 4 of them are on these lists. 1 is not, and it's Ben Powers.
Now, here's the thing, though. They're ranking top 32. So if you're not a top 32 center, then you're not starting caliber.
Right.
Okay. So by definition, each team should have a representative among the top 32 centers, although not necessarily. Maybe you could have 2 of the top 32. I mean, we'll probably get into Chris Sims quarterback rankings at some point. And I think there's at least one team that doesn't have a QB in the top 32 because he ranks 40 of them.
See, Nate is much smarter than I because he says Cecil should have said, you want to get nuts?
Let's get nuts.
One of my favorite lines from 89 Batman.
See, I think of that. I think of George Costanza. I think he says that at some point.
All right.
I think he sends that.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. And no,
but he's probably taking that from Batman.
Yeah. Ben Powers is not listed as center because someone else in the chat room, I'll bring it up here in just a little bit, but I'm going over the center rankings. and Ben Powers is not listed as a center. So Ben Powers
Just forgotten.
And that does happen sometimes. You and I have both done lists. You and I have done mock drafts, and you and I might have left the guy off that people thought should have been on there. It does happen, but when you're ranking the top 32 guards and Ben Powers isn't on it, it's just a mistake. I'm sorry. It doesn't mean this McGinnis guy is the worst person ever. It just means that's just a mistake. Somebody made a mistake by leaving Ben Powers off their list. But
I mean, think about it. By doing this, you left the highest paid guard among free agent guards this year off the list. You're saying that the guard that got the biggest contract this offseason isn't a top half guard. I respectfully disagree with that take.
I would respectfully disagree with that as
Did
well.
someone just say maybe Ben Powers' agent forgot to send the check to PFF?
Tom said that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a spicy meatball
There's
there.
a lot of conspiracy theories around PFF and their rankings, but yeah, that's just an oversight.
This is why I tend to go with the data they compile rather than the final grades that they have.
Right.
Because I don't see the calculation to the final grade, but I can see the data. So I'll respect the data.
When they're ranking all 32 centers and they have Lloyd Cushenberry at 26 of 32.
That water tastes like a tree, by the way.
What does it mean for Lloyd Cushenberry, a player who definitely, there's a couple of players with make or break this year on the offensive line. One's Garett Bolles, one's Lloyd Cushenberry. I think Miners, obviously Powers, McGlinchey, they're good to go, but Cush has a lot to prove and Bolles has a lot to prove, and Cush has got to prove he's the good Cush.
Hey, because if he doesn't prove he's the good Cush, you know what happens to him next offseason? Could end up like Dalton Risner.
Streets are cold.
Yeah. Dalton Risner is still unsigned, isn't he?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a development I did not foresee happening this offseason.
Not at all.
I mean, not thinking he was going to get a big contract, but
you're a 4-year starter that's relatively solid.
Yeah, someone usually picks you up there.
Yeah.
You think this might be it for Dalton Risner?
No. There'll be injuries. Somebody will pick him up. He's one of those camp like August, somebody's hurt in preseason, and Dalton gets a call.
And ends up sticking, and maybe he can resuscitate himself.
Yeah.
But he's going to have to take much less than he thought he was going to take.
Oh, for sure.
I mean,
and then he's not that starter. Like, did we ever worry about Dalton Risner making the team?
No.
Not one time.
No.
Not one time. Now he's clearly on that whenever he signs.
He's a bubble guy.
He might be one of those off and on type of guys.
He might be headed for the Cam Fleming zone.
Ooh.
Cam Fleming, remember, re-signed with the Broncos on the first day of camp last year. Now he's back. Got re-signed much sooner, but sometimes you got to wait. And I don't think the truck is coming to Dalton Risner's driveway in training camp the way it did for Evan Mathis back in 2015 when the Broncos signed him during training camp. I don't think that type of deal is happening.
No, that type of deal is not happening. So Lloyd Cushenberry has a ton to prove, and we'll see if he does it. How does Ben Powers help him? Because Dalton was tasked with helping Garett Bolles on the left, and then he had the rookie, I'm thinking early Cush, and I'm just going over my mind with Dalton. It's like, okay, well, Ben Powers now, Garett should take care of himself.
You'd think so here in year 7.
So what does that mean from Cush? Can Cush ride a little bit off of having Powers next to him and an emerging Quinn Miners and better coaching because you don't have Butch Barry there?
Yeah. Now the question is how good Zach Strief is going to be long term. Is he going to be a Mike Munchak? That's way too early to tell.
Yes.
Is he better than Butch Barry? I think based on what we saw last year, a potted plant would be better than Butch Barry.
It's an insult to potted plants.
At least a potted plant wouldn't yell at you.
It wouldn't cuss at you.
For no reason.
Coaching, by the way.
And by the way, and the other thing is also, you think about the personalities on the offensive line, specifically Garett Bolles, Butch Barry, the wrong type of personality for Garett Bolles.
Mm-hmm.
Some players need the arm around the shoulder rather than the verbal laceration / verbal kick in the ass.
I'm surprised Bolles didn't swing on Butch Barry. And there was maybe a running bet behind the scenes of people that we know that was
Mhm.
like, hey, I bet Garett Bolles takes a swing at him.
Yeah. I think Zach Streif's a much better fit for Garett Bolles.
1,000%.
That's why I wouldn't rule out the notion of Bolles not only being back for 2024 on the last year of that contract extension, but even getting a short-term extension beyond that. If they want to maybe give a little bit more guaranteed money to Garett Bolles, but get that cap figure down because it's $20 million for the cap figure 24. If he plays well, just take a couple of years of extension on the end of it. You can get that cap number down to, from 20 million to say 10 million. And then you're on the hook going for future years, but you've created some space for next year, which is the type of thing that Sean Payton does do in terms of his cap management.
It is Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Honda, and we like to play a game on this show. It's called What If, Mace. And there is a way that the NFL could have serious competition. You and I love developmental leagues like the XFL. I made Ben DiNucci mad when I asked him if it's a developmental league. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend, but that's what it should be. The NFL needs to have another NFL Europe. They need to have something else. They may have a direct competitor. How?
Well, we're thinking about this in light of the news today. Effectively, Live Golf, which is funded by the benignly named Public Investment Fund, which of course is funded by the Saudi Arabian government. And you've heard the term sports washing thrown around a lot over the last year or so in regards to Live Golf and in regards to the Qataris hosting the World Cup in soccer last fall. So effectively, you have this public investment fund, the Saudi Arabians. Now there's a merger between the PGA Tour and Live Golf. So effectively, they've kind of bought their way into the highest level of golf, administering that. We see that this public investment fund, they bought Newcastle United, a soccer club in England. They are investing in players to bring to the Saudi Arabian soccer league. And these are players toward the end of their careers, but they're giving them big money, getting some big names in there. And so effectively, you can see this thing going on across multiple sports now. And so it got the wheels turning here. In theory, what would prevent them from simply going up to either college players or someone said they bought into WWE. That's fine. It's not a sport. Anyway, I'm sorry.
But it's sports entertainment.
It's entertainment, but it's not a sport. I'm sorry. It's scripted, so it's not a sport. Of course, you can speculate on whether some of the other sports are scripted. Ask Arian Foster about that.
Oh yeah,
I'm waiting to see the NFL script, by the way, that Arian Foster talks about.
We're waiting on that script.
Yeah. Anyhow,
think of the splash.
In theory, okay. 40 years ago, the USFL was in its first year, right? And then 23 years before that, the AFL started. What did the USFL and AFL try to do? Their first big play was to go to players in the college ranks and just say, okay, here's a big check.
Here's a bunch of money.
Okay. If you're around in the 80s, you remember the USFL getting like Herschel Walker, for example, Steve Young for the Los Angeles Express, even a guy who eventually came here to Denver and starred, Gary Zimmerman, started off in the USFL, right?
Mm-hmm. Reggie White started in the USFL.
Yeah. Big time college talents, bring them the bag, basically. And in the AFL back in the 1960s, even though Denver as a franchise, one of the cheaper ones, I mean, this goes all the way back to the first year when the first years of the AFL, when the late Bud Adams, Houston Oilers owner, eventually moved into Tennessee, went after Billy Cannon, the Heisman Trophy winner, gave him a big check to go to the AFL rather than to the NFL. And eventually it reached a point in the AFL where you had a merger between the AFL and the NFL because the NFL was in these bidding wars. They were starting to lose more and more of them, famously losing the bidding war for Joe Namath, for example, in 1965. So looking at that, in theory, not that I want to see this in any way, shape, or form, what would stop a group that's literally worth $620 billion?
That's with a B.
But with a B, $620 billion from going up to some of these top prospects coming out of the college ranks and maybe not even draft eligible, maybe guys that are coming off their sophomore year or stellar freshman year and saying, hey, here's $50 million. Here's $100 million or whatever.
There would be no need to wait 3 years like the NFL waits in college.
Yeah.
And although I believe very few players could make the jump from high school to the NFL, there's been a few. Adrian Peterson, Marcus Dupree, DJ Williams, John Madden always said that.
I'll
DJ
say
Williams could have made that jump.
Another guy that, even though his success has been mixed, Jadeveon Clowney, I physically was ready to be an NFL player when he was
there would be
in high school in Rock Hill, South Carolina.
But you could go to a star freshman player, or you could go to the guys that we're waiting for, like a Caleb Williams, and say, here's $500 million.
In theory, like
in our league.
I mean, what would stop them? Like Caleb Williams, Drake May, like okay, here's just a massive check, right? It's one thing that, I mean, I don't think it's imminent, but after what we saw today, a year ago, who could have foreseen the PGA Tour ultimately basically declaring a truce with Live Golf?
Especially as bitter as that thing was. If I heard about it and I paid no attention to golf,
I mean,
it was bitter.
Yeah, I mean, you had the commissioner talking about, how the Saudi connections to 9/11 and, and what partnering with them would mean, said that, just under 12 months ago. And now here we are, and they're making a deal. I mean, again, money talks. This is not something that I want to see, because I don't want the sports washing to be a part of the NFL, part of football. But what in theory would stop them from doing that?
No, absolutely nothing. And it would probably work, and they'd probably get talent. People don't remember what
everyone has a price.
Herschel Walker was.
Everyone has a price.
Herschel Walker was so huge, and I'm old enough to remember when he was at Georgia, and I was a little kid. But in falling in love with football, I fell in love with Herschel Walker. And getting him to the USFL was monumental. Steve Young in the USFL was monumental. Reggie White, monumental. Like, there were players that made the jump. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam Mills made that jump too. But we're talking about major players from the college ranks. The Saudis could easily do that and do something that the XFL, the AAF, the whatever league, UFL, whatever league we're talking about, they all try to like join in with it. Wouldn't it be nice to join in? Somebody could just be a direct competitor to the NFL, and they could beat them at their own game because they have more money and they don't have the rules
and
3 years out of high school like the NFL
and
does.
Ultimately, I think the end game of that would be a merger, kind of like you see with the PGA
The NFL
Tour.
would have to, or they'd just get anybody they wanted. You would have to merge with them. You would do what the PGA just did.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where nothing is imminent by any sense of the imagination.
No. But
it's not hard to look over the horizon and see how something might happen. I mean, think about it. They're worth $620 billion, and that number is going up. It's mostly petrodollars, of course. If you took all of the teams in the NFL, let's assume every NFL team today is worth $5 billion. Fair to say, right?
It's 60 billion, right?
Yeah, it's $160 billion. That is barely 25% of the net worth of this Saudi public investment fund.
Say every team's worth 10 billion. Now it's 320 billion, and that's half of what the Saudis have available.
Yeah, it's something that it's not inconceivable right now.
And if we're talking about it, doesn't either the Saudis talk about it or Roger Goodell, the NFL, you have to be aware, because they want it to be an international game. One of the maybe mistakes, in my opinion, of Roger Goodell is like trying to get these games in Germany and trying to get these games in London. And like, you guys have the golden goose, but you know who
has the gold?
Yeah, the Saudis.
That's the thing. Yeah. And the old cliche, the golden rule, they who have the gold rules, right?
That is true.
Anyway, it's honestly, it's something I hope we're not talking about very much in the years to come, but would it surprise me at all if we were? No. Just again, I mean,
should the NFL beat them to the punch?
Imagine if the USFL had been better financed. because because you had some owners that were kind of on a shoestring there, right?
Yeah, yes.
Imagine if the USFL had a better financing across the board. I mean, we talk about petro and oil. I mean, the guy who paid Herschel Walker wasn't Donald Trump originally. It was J. Walter Duncan. He was an oil magnate from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And then he got tired of traveling from Oklahoma to New Jersey for the games, and then he sold to Donald Trump, which opened up a whole another can of worms, and we're not going to get into that.
Right. But that sale actually led to the downfall of the USFL.
Yes.
So if you're the NFL, our final point on this, and we're giving you a little overtime today, Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Honda. Should the NFL nip it in the bud and beat them to the punch and go approach the Saudis and say, like, hey, would any sort of partnership, they want to be international, they want teams in Germany, they want teams in England.
I don't think you voluntarily make a deal like that, because I think the PR.
Well, it's either that or they're going to ruin you. You're going to merge with them one way or the other. Maybe it's 20 years from now. Maybe you and I are long gone, Mace. And there's some young shaver that remembers, I remember watching Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Honda. And those guys were awesome. And I fell in love with football because of Andrew Mason and Cecil Lammey. Maybe that would happen.
Wow.
But it's gonna happen. And it's more than a developmental league, because Detroit, Michigan control our guys. Like, they need a development. This is a direct competitor with the best players that could be available, because you just pay them.
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, there are two models for doing it. Either the retire the late career model, which is what they're doing with the soccer league over in Saudi Arabia right now. Like, with multiple players, it could, and literally Lionel Messi could be going over to play his golden years in Saudi Arabia. Like, I mean, for a long time, people thought he'd come over to the U.S. and play for Inter Miami. I don't think Inter Miami and David Beckham's group is going to offer him the same kind of money that he'd get over in Saudi Arabia. So it's basically a bottomless reservoir of cash. But the way to do it, again, and this is just learning from your history, and those who did not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. The history of football says that when challenges have happened, and it's part of the draft structure makes this possible, that when the challenges have happened, the challenges have come from going after the young talent coming up, not in soccer like the old talent getting toward the end of their career and wanting one last payday. I'm sure somebody in their group has thought of that at some point.
Yes. So,
but the thing is, it's a fine line to walk, because if you voluntarily make a deal with the Saudis, I mean, the PR hit is going to be drastic.
For somehow, some way, and this is going to venture into waters that people may be uncomfortable with, Mace, but you and I are are both adults, and we can talk about this type of stuff. For whatever reason, the NFL has been able to absorb PR hit after PR hit after PR hit and still be the league that everybody's crazy about.
They have a hell of a product.
I don't know why exactly, but there are multiple things that have happened in this league over the last decade that would have damaged a brand, like, heavily. And that is part of today's conversation, damaging brands. The NFL has been able to stay above that while also having that bad PR. They've been able to grow and continue to get larger.
Well, didn't the Saudis buy into Live Nation too? I mean, WWE and Live Nation. Okay, so these are entertainment operations, but
yes,
it doesn't seem like anybody has stopped going to partake of those outfits because of it. It's cynical and sad. I mean, ultimately,
if the Saudis wanted to, they could put college football out of business and the NFL out of business.
Yeah,
if they wanted to, because you just go get the best players from high school, give them a bunch of money, and everyone go play football.
Yeah, the NIL money is a pittance compared to Saudi money in terms of what they could offer. And it wouldn't be hard to put together a league beyond those star players. I mean, you could just go to fringe NFL players whose contracts are go and say, okay, hey, you want a veteran player like Ezekiel Elliott, late career veteran. Oh, here's one last score. Here's another $30 million. I
was going to say 10 million. You're just throwing money around.
Maybe like 30 over three or something.
Okay.
Yeah, here's one last big score. For fringe players, let's say you're a backup and you're making around the league minimum for your experience level.
Mhm.
And they come and say, okay, here, we're going to double your salary. Instead of making $1 million, you're going to make $2 million. And instead of having only $200,000 guaranteed, every dollar is guaranteed. And there's another thing. Okay. What is like a big issue in NFL contracts? It's the lack of guaranteed money.
Right.
One reason why Live Golf did succeed at getting some recognizable names was effectively saying, okay, there are no cuts. You're going to make this check, done. Like, you can rely on this money.
And I know it's the NFLPA, but any sort of unionization of players in a Saudi league, they'd be like, we're getting fully guaguaranteed money.
Yes.
You go to,
and they would say fine. They basically, the Saudis would probably say, fine, okay, we're going to give you a $2 million, a 1 year, $2.5 million deal. Every dollar is guaranteed.
Yeah. And
if you are, if you're one of those fringe free agents that's signing with a team in May or June for a deal that's got that is, $1.5 million for a year, and I mean, what was Kareem Jackson's guarantee, like $300K or something like that?
Something like that.
And instead, they're saying, okay, well, there's $2.5 million every dollar is guaranteed. There are some players who will say, I'm taking that. I mean, it's everyone will make their own decision for their own reasons, but everybody has a price.
Yes.
And you have a price. I have a price. That's the reality of this world in which we live, as long as it's, it's capitalistic in its essence. We all have prices.
And imagine going to, I said Jarrett Stidham initially, imagine going to Drew Lock and saying, Drew, here's 20 million over 3 years or whatever, and you're going to start. Hey, the NFL's awesome, but these players want to play.
Yeah.
And if you're a guy like Locke, you want to play. You want to get out there, prove everybody wrong. You're getting a bunch of money, more money than you could make in the NFL. Forget waiting around to be a Geno Smith. Jacoby Brissett, he's competing with Sam Howell, right? In Washington. Hey, Jacoby, you're the starter of whatever team. Yeah.
I mean, the USFL did that 40 years ago too, because it wasn't just the young players. I mean, it was guys like Cliff Stout and Chuck Fusina and Ed Luther, who were backups in the NFL, and we're gonna give you a nice check and you can start. You can go, Cliff Stout, you can go be the starter for the Birmingham Stallions instead of backing up in Pittsburgh, right? And okay, fine, signs on the dotted line. It would work multiple ways, and I mean, it's, again, because we've seen that model exist before. It's, in one case it did force a merger, in the other case it didn't. And there was, of course, the famous lawsuit, the $1 verdict, which was tripled to $3. But they didn't have the financial heft that the Saudis do.
Right. Now, Swinks brings up something that I always have to adjust on. And Swink, we love you. So I'm just going to say this. When you talk about the NCAA being the minor league, college football is completely different from the NFL.
College football serves its own purpose,
and the NCAA is in it for the NCAA
and its own money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I know there's NIL now, and it seems like there are university people out there, not our guy Swink, but people around the university. Well, we're giving them NIL money. What do they want?
And also,
hey, how about some freshman stud who makes $50 million from the Saudis?
And also, Swink, you mentioned can't just grab players from high school, or the draft would be void. That doesn't matter. The Saudis, the draft doesn't matter.
Yeah. You're getting your own players.
They're getting their own players.
Hey, Arch Manning.
They would circumvent the draft in the same way the USFL circumvented the draft back in the 80s to get Herschel Walker and Steve Young and players like that.
Yeah.
Mike Rozier, Heisman Trophy winner.
Was it 4 years out of college?
Yeah.
That rule back then?
And because Herschel Walker was in year 3
yes.
at Georgia.
Yes.
And he jumped to the USFL after that third year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The thing, and that's the other thing, you can't, in this process, don't assume that they're going to play by the rules as we know them.
Right.
If they were to make a challenge, the rules, the norms, the 3 years out from high school before draft eligible, that would not matter to the Saudis if they were trying to horn in on the NFL's territory.
Yeah. If they wanted to take over and have a league, they could do it.
Yeah.
They could do it. So,
I mean, I hope it doesn't come to that, but
I think we are, and you and I
we'll
said,
see.
what, a decade? Like, we're going to see sports change.
I would say like today, because the PGA Tour did, make that deal. Today is the first day that I looked at the landscape and thought these people could radically change professional sports as we know it and how we've known it for generations.
Mm-hmm.
And that they have the wherewithal to do it. So we'll see. That it's not something you can just dismiss offhandedly anymore after today.
Right. Okay.
That's a good place to end this conversation, I think.
That is a wrap for today's program. 15 minutes of overtime. I love it. I know all y'all.
This was an appropriate overtime subject, I think, though.
And it's something that deserves that sort of conversation. And I know you guys want an hour show. We're working on stuff like new titles, Mace, for the show. So yes, stick with us. Tell a friend about Orange Blue Today, which is always presented by Champ Honda. Tell a friend. Spread the love.
If you like the show, tell a friend. If you don't like it, tell us. I've seen that in a few restaurants over the years.
Really?
Yes.
I like that.
Yeah.
I always do the old Jim Rome thing of like, hey, give me a listen, adjusted taste. Give me a listen for 2 weeks. If you don't like it, listen for 2 more weeks.
Okay. 2 weeks though for a 3-hour-a-day show is a heck of an investment.
It is.
I mean, that's like 30 hours. I mean, all we're asking is 30 to 45 minutes of your time every day. Of course, that adds up. That's 2.5 hours a week.
Yeah.
It's not insignificant.
We're giving you the best Broncos coverage that you can find. It's Orange and Blue Today.
You don't have to buy it. It's free.
He's Andrew Mason. No paywalls. I'm Cecil Lammey. At Mace Denver. At Cecil Lammey. We appreciate you all. And thank you very much, as always, for watching this show. As always, want you to be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. Stay tuned. And please, would you stay frosty?